I want to introduce the Human-Centered Leadership Council, and we're going to have a panel come up in a moment. I just want to re-ground us in where we started with this a year ago. At this event last year, we launched our Human-Centered Leadership Panel, and or Leadership Council, and we sat over on this side of the room and talked about the ideas that Bobby was just sharing, the ideas that those soft skills are not soft, that they are essential. And we recognize that human-centered leadership is complex. We all had different ideas and contributions but we also all agreed that it's the right thing to do. And in that year since then, we have undertaken research where we have spoken with over 40 leaders across healthcare. We also convened at Intermountain, thanks to Shannon Phillips and her team who hosted us there, to delve into what are the masteries that a human-centered leader needs to have. And we arrived at a very simple definition of what it is to lead in a human-centered way. It's leading people with humanity. So never forgetting that, yes, a leader has a responsibility to achieve goals, but a leader's first and foremost responsibility is to her people. We delved into a slightly deeper definition of that, which is that human-centered leadership is leadership that explicitly supports team members' cognitive, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being so they can maximize their human and healing potential. And that really breaks down into two core components. The first is that well-being is critical, but it's not simple. It's not one component. We often look at physical. A lot of programs are looking at let's exercise or eat. But it's also emotional. It's spiritual in whatever way that means, connection to community or faith for some people. It's cognitive load. It's thinking about all of the things that we demand of people and whether we're overloading them so that their capacity to function is diminished. Or really, it's about creating an environment that protects all of those things. And then the second is that it's maximizing human and healing potential. And so in healthcare, we often talk about productivity, but really the true work of healthcare is healing, whether you're in the back office, the front lines, leadership. And so, yes, we want people to achieve their maximum potential at work, but the role of a leader doesn't ignore that these are people, and they're achieving their highest human potential is of equal magnitude. So if we get their productivity, but we've destroyed their soul, we haven't done the work of human-centered leadership. So through the research, we've narrowed in on the whole array of competencies, and we're calling them masteries because mastering something is more, I think, more appealing than competency. Although I would argue that when we say mastery, it's not a destination, it is always a journey. And we sort of arrayed them along two different axes. And this is all in your app. So in Attendify, you can download the Human-Centered Leadership Mastery Model that has this all in detail. But I think the two axes are interesting. This is what came out of our convening at Intermountain. First is that these masteries fall into three core components, that it's the heart set, the mindset, and the skill set. So we often hear about mindset and skill set as part of leadership, but that heart set, that deep commitment to those quote-unquote soft skills, that deep caring and love for colleagues, peers, patients, and families is part of human-centered leadership. And then also along the additional axis of individual mastery or leading self, relational. So it starts with knowing and being centered in yourself so that, as Bobby indicated, you know you can have someone's back when they've lived their values. Relational mastery, leading others, and then mission mastery, so speaking to leading towards organizational excellence. And as I said, it's in the app, so I'm not going to try to, first of all, I made the text too small, so you can't probably even read it. My intention was not to go through this, but what I encourage you to do, and I actually have an ask on this as well, we looked at all of these different masteries that a human-centered leader has and arrayed them across these components. And then we built out a way of operationalizing it, of not from an organizational perspective, that's the next step, but from an individual leadership perspective. And so my ask to all of you is to go in and look at that and add to it, or critique it, tell us how to edit it. That's still a work in progress. It basically speaks to ways you can develop yourself or help your peers or other leaders or emerging leaders develop along those 9 quadrants. That doesn't make sense. The 9 boxes, 2 quadrants and a +1. And resources you can use to do that. And what we want to hear from you is, what resources have you found helpful? Books, trainings, things, and they're organized into things that are learning and things that are engaging. So it's not just about knowing it intellectually, it's how do you live it. So that is the ask. But rather than delving into all of that in detail now, what we wanted to do instead is invite 3 of our human-centered leadership council members, 3 leaders who exemplify this, to come up and share with you some of their journeys, some of their challenges, and some of their beliefs and successes around human-centered leadership. So I'm thrilled to invite Shannon Phillips, who is our chair of the Human-Centered Leadership Council, a physician and chief patient experience officer at Intermountain, Trip Welch, who is the vice chair of quality management at Mayo Clinic, and Diana Levesque, who is the chief administrative officer and focuses on HR excellence at Genesis Healthcare System. Thank you all.
Good morning. If people need a stretch break, we're at Intermountain. We stand up in the middle of things. So please, literally, you'll be speaking and having this profound moment, and 3 people will get up, and it's because they're trying to move. Sitting is not good. So please feel free to do that. We'll know you're present with us. Thanks for the opportunity. We had a really, I think, robust conversation over the summer, and it's heartening and disheartening to see that it can be reduced to a slide. So I would agree that we would really appreciate people taking a look at the content that they've placed out there for you to review and give it a hard look, because this is a complicated and important topic, I think. I think for organizations to get to the human-centeredness, the humanism that we can find, and I really appreciated Bobby's comments on that, it probably has to start with leadership, right? How we show up to things. And so I think we had a good time with that. And I guess if it was easy to do, we probably wouldn't be sitting here, and it'd already be done. So I guess maybe I'll ask, we're going to all kind of comment, but Trip and Diana, to start, maybe, what makes this so hard? I think we're in a room of people that believe, well, of course, right? Human-centered leadership, we need that. It's important for our patients and the business we're in. But what's so hard? What are the barriers getting in the way? Maybe Diana, you want to start?
Probably the thing that I have noticed most in working with individuals and reflecting on my own journey to human-centered leadership is really finding that space where you can be, as we heard other speakers talk about, be vulnerable. Finding a space to feel comfortable enough to share who you are and reveal who you are to the people that you're leading. You're in an environment where, trust is important and they need to know you. But that's really hard for some people to open themselves up and to be vulnerable and tell the stories of your successes, but also the stories of your trials and your failures, because that's what make us human, and we have to be able to do that. And that's very difficult for some people, and it's, in my opinion, sometimes almost impossible to teach. It's something that you have to be willing to do.
I think that's a wonderful answer, and to build off of it, I think one of the greatest challenges is to get the next generation of leaders to believe that this is what will be rewarded. So where do we break this cycle? Dr. Gestalt mentioned that in med school they don't teach